A brave woman saves the life of her husband by S.C. Turnbo. Pruitt Post Office in Boone County, Arkansas, is at the old Burlington Stand, 8 miles south of Omaha on the Springfield-Harrison Wagon Road. Omaha is near where the White River branch of the Missouri Pacific Railroad passes through the tunnel. Now, Mr. J.D. Rowe, a former resident of Pruitt, gives the following wartime incident to the writer in a letter dated at Pruitt on the 9th day of July, 1903. My father's name was Jacob J. Rowe. My mother's maiden name was Julia A. Winters. Now, both of them were born and raised in Harrison County, Indiana, and were married in the same neighborhood where they were reared. After their marriage, they moved to Boone County in the same state where they remained until the fall of 1857, when they left their native state and started west for further waters and settled in St. Clair County, Missouri. At the breaking out of the war, my father sympathized with the Union, but did not wise up to take arms. But this did not prevent him from falling a victim from the hands of the guerrillas, which occurred in the spring of 1862. At the time of his death, he was several miles from home on the Osage River. He was killed with 2 other men who were our neighbors, and all 3 were in a skiff when they were discovered by the bushwhacker and shot to death. Going on with the wartime story, Mr. Rowe said in his letter, I remember a case in southern Missouri that come under my personal observation, though I was just but 10 years old. It was in 1861, and Mr. Richard Worst hadn't expressed his sentiments most too freely in favor of the Union, and someone thought that they would be doing their country a service to send him to his long last home by the shotgun route. One night near 9 o'clock, this brave patriot crept up to Mr. Worst's house, shotgun in hand, and concealed himself in the chimney corner. Mrs. Worst had already retired, and Richard was arranging the fire to keep overnight. All at once, he heard a peculiar noise outside the house by the side of the fireplace. And he finished arranging the fire, went to bed, and asked his wife if she had any idea what was making the noise on the chimney corner. She raised up on her elbow and listened, and said she expected it was a cow that jumped into the yard and was licking the soap barrel. He said he'd go and drive her away, and started for the door. Mrs. Worst jumped out of bed, grabbed hold of his arm, and stopped him and said, No, you won't go out there. I'll go myself. So she went, dressed in a long white nightrobe, and she stepped around the corner of the house, and she saw a gun with its muzzle near her breast and a man holding it by the breech. They both stood still in an instant. When the man withdrew the gun and started to run, he leapt over the yard fence and disappeared into the darkness. I have heard Mrs. Worst say repeatedly that she had no other idea than what was a cow licking until her husband said he would go out and turn her out, when the thought flew through her mind that there was a man there to kill him. She instantly made up her mind that she would face him and die if need be to save her husband. Now, the next evening at dusk, Mr. Worst thought it would be safe for him to go outside the yard fence near 50 yards and bring in a couple sticks of wood. Now, he put one stick on his shoulder and the other under his arm and started to the house. When nearly to the yard fence, a bullet struck the stick of wood on his shoulder, and at the same time he heard the report of a gun in the timber behind him. Mrs. Worst was standing in the door, fearful that her husband would be shot down, and afterwards I heard her say that when the gun fired she was almost frightened to death, but she remembered that Richard was not long in dropping the sticks of wood and jumping the fence, and was in the house before she hardly had time to move out of his way. He never stopped in the house, but telling his faithful wife good-bye, he shot out the house at the opposite door and soon disappeared, bareheaded, into the cornfield of the back of the house. She never saw him for many days afterward, and when she did see him, he was with a company of soldiers. This happened in St. Clair County, and they soon afterward made their way into the state of Ohio, where they could lay down in peace and not be shot at while carrying wood into the house.